Hey everyone, it's Michael Bennett, and the purpose of this video is to help you to understand human trafficking victims' mindsets and the common barriers to victim identification. In the following video, I'm going to outline a wide variety of both physical and psychological reasons why trafficked persons cannot or will not leave a trafficking situation. This list is inclusive of both sex and labor trafficking operations, as well as foreign-born and U.S. citizen victims. Now, this list that I'm going to give you is not meant to be interpreted as present in all trafficking cases, and this is not by any means every phenomena that may be observed in a case. I'm going to start with point number 1, and that's captivity and confinement. Past examples have included victims being locked indoors, held in guarded compounds, or locked in trunks of cars. Frequent accompaniment or being guarded. In many trafficking networks, victims' public interactions are mediated, monitored, or entirely controlled. In certain severe cases, victims have been controlled by armed guards. Use of threat and violence. Several physical retaliation, and by that I mean beatings, rape, sexual assault, and torture, are combined with threats to hold victims in a constant state of fear and obedience. Fear. Fear manifests in many ways in a trafficking situation, including fear of physical retaliation, of death, of arrest, or of harm to one's loved ones. Use of reprisals and threats of reprisals against loved ones or third parties. Traffickers target reprisals at children, parents, siblings, and friends, or other trafficking victims. Shame. Victims from all cultures and in both sex and labor cases may be profoundly ashamed about the activities they have been forced to perform. Self-blame links closely to low self-esteem. Self-blame. In the face of an extremely psychologically manipulative situation, trafficked persons may engage in self-blaming attitudes and blame themselves for being duped into a situation beyond their control. Self-blaming attitudes are often reinforced by the traffickers and can serve to impede the victim from testifying against or faulting the trafficker. Debt bondage. Traffickers create inflated debts that victims cannot realistically pay off. These debts are often combined with accruing interest or small fees to ensure that the victim stays in the debt situation. Traumatic bonding to the trafficker. In many trafficking cases, victims have exhibited commonly known behaviors of traumatic bonding due to the violence and psychological abuse. Another name for this is Stockholm Syndrome. Language and social barriers. Feelings of unfamiliarity or fear of the unknown provide obstacles to leaving a trafficking situation. These feelings are exasperated by language and social barriers. Distrust of law enforcement or service providers. In many cases, traffickers are known to brainwash victims into a false distrust of law enforcement, government officials, and service providers. Victims also may have had negative past experiences with institutional systems, which also impact trust levels. Isolation. Traffickers purposely isolate victims from a positive support structure and foster controlled environments where the victim is kept in a state of complete dependency. High levels of dependency and learned helplessness often lead victims to prefer the hell they know than face the uncertainty of adapting to a new world of independence. False promises. Traffickers use sophisticated methods of manipulating the human desire to hope through false promises and lies about a future better life. Victims who are children are especially vulnerable to these false promises. Hopelessness and resignation. In the face of extreme control, violence, and captivity, notions of hope may fade over time towards states of hopelessness and resignation. Facilitated drug addiction. In certain trafficking networks, Traffickers provide addictive substances to their victims to foster longer-term drug addiction and monetary dependency. Psychological trauma. Many trafficking victims experience significant levels of psychological trauma due to the levels of abuse they have endured. In certain cases, this trauma leads to disassociation, depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which in turn affects daily functioning and levels of agency. Lack of awareness of available resources. Victims may not leave a situation due to a lack of awareness of any resources or services designed to help them. Traffickers purposely control the information that victims receive. Low levels of self-identifying as trafficking victims. The majority of trafficking victims do not self-identify as victims of human trafficking. They may be unaware of the elements of the crime or the federal criminal paradigm designed to protect them. Normalization of exploitation. Over a long period of enduring several levels of trauma, physical abuse, and psychological manipulation, victims demonstrate resilience strategies and defense mechanisms that normalize the abuse in their minds. In a relative mental assessment, what once may have been viewed as abuse may now be experienced as a normal part of everyday life. This changing lens on viewing the world impacts the ability to self-identify as a victim. A belief that no one cares to help. Trafficking victims may believe that no one cares to help them, a belief that is reinforced by both the trafficker's lies, but also when community members do not take a strong stance against trafficking. When the community is silent on the issue, traffickers' power is increased and feelings of hopelessness are sustained. In addition to all of the factors that I've mentioned already, numerous additional factors contribute to the difficulty of trafficking victim identification. These factors include the frequent movement of victims, which fosters a low likelihood of multiple encounters with law enforcement or service providers. Victims may not be in one place long enough for a meaningful intervention. Victims may be trained to tell lies or canned stories to the organizations that are there to help them. Victims rarely come into contact with institutional systems. Untrustworthy or corrupt interpreters may impact the course of effective service provision. Well, I would like to thank the Polaris Project for all of the great work that they do and for preparing this document, which is for broad distribution and which was the source of my video presentation. The Polaris Project is a nonprofit organization that I financially support because I found that they do great work. They also run the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is there to help anyone who calls. The FBI also has useful information on their website, as does the Department of Homeland Security. Now I would like to thank you for your attention during my presentation. I hope that you found it useful. I hope that these resources at the end are something that you might consider checking out for even more information. And I would like to encourage you that if you see something, look into the situation. Everyone has parents. Everyone has loved ones. And sometimes we need to look out for our fellow man.